Thank you very much. Dear guests, on behalf of the International Astronautical Federation, it's my pleasure to welcome you all this morning at this industry breakfast, and which is kindly sponsored by Nanoracks. And we are kicking off more or less the Industry Day 2022, the IAC Industry Day 2022. And now we know that there's a little bottleneck at the security, and there will be more people coming, but I have at least to start off the session. So you know that since several years now, the Industry Day, thanks also to the tireless efforts of the IAF Industry Relation Committee, has become really an important day and a highlight, and it's always just right at the beginning of the IAC, and provides the space community with a platform that you can really exchange, and I see you do that very well, yeah? It gives also an opportunity to get insights from experts and new companies and on the newest topics. So, while thanking once again our sponsor Nanoracks for this morning, I am delighted now to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Amila Wilson. Dr. Amila, that's correct, no? Amila Wilson serves as CEO of Nanoracks, where she focused on expanding the growth of Nanoracks space system and payload services, while scaling the organization for prime commercial, civil, and defense programs. Sorry, I'm neglecting you a little bit. The podium is oriented like that. So she oversees the development of key Nanoracks programs, including the Starlab free-flying commercial space station. And prior to joining Nanoracks in October 2021, Amila served as the Senior Vice President and General Manager at Mercury Systems. Previously, Amila has also served in several senior executive positions, including Vice President and General Manager at FLIR Systems and Elbit Systems of America, Sector Vice President for Program Management, Platform Logistics at L3 Aerospace System, and many more. Dr. Wilson, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Pascal. Distinguished guests, astronauts, space enthusiasts, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us for breakfast, and thank you, IAF, for hosting what has been already, yesterday was a full day, such a wonderful days of the events here in Paris. So Pascal introduced me as Amila Wilson, and I am just trying to say that I'm very proud to be the CEO of Nanoracks, and I'm excited to tell you about Nanoracks and what we are doing. We are a global leader in providing commercial space services and systems, and we have been in business 13 years, actually this month. So it was a huge milestone for us, and so many of you, as of recently, if you haven't heard from Nanoracks, you definitely heard of us about our most exciting news, in which we are currently designing and building a commercial free-flying space station that it's going to be launched by the end of this decade, and the intent is to replace International Space Station. That's a pretty big deal. Thank you. But we couldn't come there in one leap. As you know, it took a while to build to that moment. So I will today just tell you a little bit about Nanoracks' growth, where we started, and how we get to this inflection point as a company, and share some exciting news that it's hot off the press. As you could imagine, international conference wouldn't be there without a hot press news that are being released. So Nanoracks started with a mission 13 years ago, thank you, 13 years ago to make a research and science and opportunities on the International Station affordable and easily accessible to many 13 years ago, as you know now, I mean, the new space ecosystem really didn't exist. If you kind of compare where we are today versus 13 years ago, it was really unfathomable changes that happened. There was no commercial pathway to the space research, only through the government opportunities. NASA, and thank you, NASA, I know some of you may be here, NASA took a chance on Nanoracks, making us the first company that ever owned and operated research hardware on the International Space Station. Currently, that's super common. We all do that every day. There's so many experiments that belong to the commercial companies that are readily flying on the International Space Station. But 10 years ago, that was almost impossible. And thank you, NASA, for that, because you were a catalyst of helping us be where we are today. This concept, thank you, of the commercial space station continued to evolve. We helped uncover the market of the small satellite deployment, which started like, why don't we do that? And it was a kind of a joke, and we made it happen. So we are proud to be the first company to enable commercial satellite deployment to many of our friends that you guys know and hold in hard regards, like Spire and Planet and GomSpace and more of them. We launched their very first satellites. So this photo behind me was in 2014, I guess. It changed the game, what was meant to be the affordable satellite deployment, which we are today, and the small sat revolution has begun. And then we extended the research to the hardware in a more complex and advanced system, bringing professional research and government customers. Now, government who used to be a customer, well, us industry who used to be a customer of the government, now turn into government being a customer of ours, and pushing the idea that the government can be the customer to the industry into the commercial pathways like anybody else. As you know, the industry all around, outside of space, has actually proven that model, and then now we are seeing government being customer to us. So now the government is planning to be a customer of our very own space station. And you know, you don't move from a satellite to the building a space station in one leap, as I mentioned. So in the last few years, there was a decent amount of bottleneck in accessing the International Space Station. And then we decided to take yet another challenge upon ourselves. And we aspired to build a big doorway called Bishop Airlock to access an International Space Station at ease, in or out. So from that aspiration to help actually increase the throughput of the commercial access, Bishop Airlock was built as a first permanent commercial addition to the International Space Station. And so with the partnership of our friends in the design and development, Thales Alenia Space, I'm not sure if anyone's here from the team, Bishop Airlock was completely self-funded, and it was our first step in building a space infrastructure, which actually gave us very confident of taking another leap of going and building a space station. We need, as you know, the airlocks on every International Space Station needs it. We will need them in the space stations of the future. And as some of you have seen, we just recently helped NASA eliminate the trash. It was a really big pile as a trash that we launched through the Bishop Airlock because it was a huge opening. Currently, we are testing robotics, helping mature technology. And if you have a need for technological maturation, we would love to help you there. So over the years, if I kind of step back and say what happened to us in this past 13 years, it was not a magic, but we brought about 1,300 missions to space and have a customer over 35 nations around the world. We pride ourselves to be a global company and supporting a global community. Many of our team you met for the first time in an International Space Conference is why International Space Conference for us is really an opportunity to network, learn about you and you learn about us. Many of the programs and achievements have met really people meeting in the breakfasts like this one and enabled many startups to actually materialize their dreams. So we owe this to this community, a great level of thanks. So let me talk to you about some exciting things happening in our commercial space station. This is really exciting things that we are doing. Our space station, you probably heard of it, it's called Starlab. It came to life over the last year, although I have to admit, probably it has been dreamt many, many years ago. Nanoracks, which was a part of Voyager's space family, is continuing making great progress with our friends from Lockheed Martin in refining architecture of our key systems. But as you could imagine, for us, architecture and hardware is a normal part. What is more unique is defining the business model and ensuring that the commercial space station is actually sustainable in the business operations. That's where the fun begins. The core of a Starlab and the core of our history, if you wish, is George Washington Carver Science Park, which was the first ever science park in space. We named it by George Washington Carver, who was a famous American scientist, and in honor of his legacy of scientific discovery, specifically in agriculture. He developed hundreds of modern food products and revolutionizing architecture technology in the United States, so we felt that would be an honor to carry his name. The Science Park today, in some shape and form, operates in the same way on the International Space Station, because that is what Nanoracks has done all along, through collection of the hardware on board and enabling technologies. That was the step one. Of course, ultimately, it will be available to operate on a Starlab, and we aspire to do something more. But step two is what I'm really happy to talk about today. This morning, Voyager Space announced that George Washington Carver Science Park Terrestrial Lab, yes, the science park on the ground, completely dedicated to the support of space research, will be located in the Ohio State University. Part of the two-phase program, the effort will begin this year with a facility at the Ohio State University's College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. I saw some folks from Ohio State earlier. Thank you, guys. Next year, we plan to break ground on a standalone facility on the Ohio State Aerospace and Air Transportation campus. So exciting news. Locating George Washington Carver Science Park Terrestrial Lab in Ohio means that Nanoracks and Voyager gain direct access to some of the best and the brightest talent in the world, with nearly 100,000 university researchers, faculty, staff, students, and partnership in a very productive environment with the academia and academic resources. We feel ourselves unstoppable in this capacity, not to mention Ohio is the birthplace of aviation, and you heard my background, and I came from aerospace industry. Now, I mentioned earlier, we really are a global company, and we continue to think in a global sense. Looking more internationally, Starlab and the Science Park offer us a unique opportunity to engage directly the newcomers, entrepreneurs, rising stars in the space industry, including space agencies that are not currently front and center on the ISS. We felt ourselves as an enabler all along. So we are a globally focused company, and long-term sustainability means having a widespread international partner and customer network. That is why I'm excited to share that yesterday we announced that we have signed Memorandum of Understanding across the Latin America in support of these Nanoracks commercial activities with the Science Park, Star Lab, and beyond. This includes working with our friends from Mexican Space Agency, Colombian Space Agency, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Costa Rica. As you could imagine, many more of these memorandum and understanding are in areas of collaboration across Nanoracks, Voyager, and on our Star Lab is in work. This is just the beginning for us and our Star Lab program. We cannot wait to share more with you in the coming months, and of course in years as you start watching us, as we start building the space station. So that was in a nutshell about 13 years of making that actually culminating in aspiring and building, designing, building a Star Lab. But that was really just a snapshot of Nanoracks. I think I'm excited about it. I'm excited of the progress of where the company is going. Being the CEO is just, my job is easy. The team has a challenge, and it was outstanding joint effort. But so that's in a nutshell. I know that the breakfast is really about networking. I'm not going to take much time from you. I wanted to introduce my next guest. So honored today to introduce Mr. Chirag Parikh. He's the Executive Secretary of U.S. National Space Council. Chirag was appointed in 2021 with responsibility for advising the President and Vice President on domestic and international policy across the civil, commercial, and national security sectors, as well as mentoring and implementing the President's space policy. Chirag and I managed to meet each other not that long ago when he called and suggested that I join a few others to brief Vice President of United States Kamala Harris about the space, commercial space solutions. So I had the privilege and honor to meet Chirag before. So before I get the podium to Chirag, I just wanted to thank audience and participation today. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of Nanoracks. So please welcome Mr. Chirag Parikh.
First of all, if I may, because I'm from Ohio, OH, there we go, okay. Excellent win yesterday, or yesterday, before yesterday now. Hello everybody, good morning, welcome to the IAC. It's been far too long since I've been back to the IAC, and what an incredible venue. The capital of space for the last week and this week is right here in Paris, and thank you to our French hosts, not just in Paris, but across the country. I've had several meetings with different ministries across the government of Paris or government of France, and what an excellent venue. I can't see anybody because I think I'm on this as your future design of your space station right now. But there's so much international participation here. It is wonderful to be able to see our international partners and our industry partners as well. I only have maybe 5 or 10 minutes, so I want to make sure that I hit on a few things here. First, of course, Chirag Parikh, National Space Council. As everybody knows, the United States has a very vibrant space industry. We have a vibrant government sector. It's very large, a lot of different moving pieces. And one of our roles at the Space Council is to be able to organize all the different things that are happening in space. And part of this, as I think everybody here knows, is that the Venn diagram of space has changed. When we began the space race, it was just the government. And then there was government and a little overlap of the private sector. Government, national security, then of civil, then a little bit of commercial. Now, those three areas, civil space, national security space, and of course, commercial space, are overlapping so much more now that it requires a deeper level of integration and commitment. But the other element about what we're doing on the Space Council is it's not just about what's up there. And it was so great to hear that you're thinking about the people down here as well. it's about the use of space. How does space benefit humanity? And that's one of the things that Vice President Harris has been very, very open about, is space is not just to do space things. Space is to be able to make life on Earth better. Whether we're talking about Earth observation, we're talking about responsible behaviors in space, we're talking about national security, we're talking about jobs, economy, diversity, equity, inclusiveness. Space has the ability to touch every one of these sectors. And while this is a space conference, one of the challenges I'll give you is the challenge that I've been given is go to a not space conference. Go somewhere where they don't know about space, but they can be, they may not know that they already use space, or that this is how space can benefit your industry or your culture or your civilization or your society. And that's the important part about what we're doing as our industry, and that's what we're doing from a Space Council perspective. One of the members of our Space Council, of course, NASA, of course, Department of Defense, and Department of Commerce, also a member of our Space Council, Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor. Those are very important components of the use of space, but also the employers of space. Department of Education is a new member of our Space Council, because the next generation of our workforce has to be trained, has to be inspired, and those are some of the things that we're working on here. 2 Fridays ago now, Vice President Harris held the second convening of the National Space Council, an incredible venue. It was at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Several of you were there, and thank you for attending, but the venue was the best part about it, because it was in the large bay with all the life-size components of the ISS module, where the astronauts are actually training. To talk about space in a place where so many of us dreamed to actually train was just it was a dream come true for me as well. And what we talked about was a few things. We talked about climate. How are we able to use climate data? The sensors that all of our space agencies, ESA, JAXA, ISRO, the United States, NASA, NOAA, so many different space agencies, all this data is there. How do we make that data accessible for people to use? And I don't mean research scientists and PhDs and postdocs, and I don't mean data scientists and climate scientists. I mean city planners. I mean people in developing nations who don't have the education and training, so they can say, this is where the malaria is going to happen. This is where vegetation is going to be poor. This is where the soil is going to be rich. How do you make the data that we build, that we collect, how do we make that more accessible? And NASA has introduced something called the Earth Information Center as a way to be able to look at that. First, focus on greenhouse gases. The other element that we talked about was STEM. But I think we should broaden the term of STEM. Often when we think about STEM, of course, we think science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Every one of those components are important for our industry. What we also should be thinking about is our workforce. Because as actually, funny enough, the Secretary of Education said at the first Space Council meeting, the best friend of an astronaut is a welder. Because you want to make sure that rocket is in tip-top shape. And we recognize that fact. And so we've released, 2 Fridays ago, a roadmap for STEM and the workforce. And the workforce, we'll talk about in just a second, but what we're trying to do to build the next generation is 3 things. First, it's to inspire the next generation of space. And think about it. When you're in grade school, what do you want to be? You want to be those things that you observe. And most of the times it's an athlete, because you see sports, an actor, an actress, because you see movies, a singer, a doctor, a nurse, maybe a mother or father, because you love how you're being raised. That's what you want to be. But there's always one more. There's always one more. I want to be an astronaut. Because people love space. They love space. It reminds them of childhood. That's what inspires them. How do you grab them? So first, it's to inspire them. How do we get ourselves as an industry out there? But also, how do we prepare our educators to get them ready to help the next generation of students? So we've developed a plan and a roadmap to be able to inspire. The next one is then to prepare. K through 12, inspire, prepare. It's at the university level, but not just your four-year universities, trade schools, technical colleges, and others. We need to be able to help when you are getting ready to go into the workforce. You as the industry, are you getting the people you need to be able to hit the ground running, or do you have to get them all spun up again? We should have better entrances into you. And then the third element is employ. What do we need to do to partner with the industry to employ? So one of the things that we've done in partnership with a lot of different companies, but I'll name at least two associations, Aerospace Industries Association and the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and over a dozen other companies, we've actually partnered with them to start developing a plan on how we're going to build the skilled technical workforce. There are tens of thousands of people who are building and built the architecture for the Artemis program. There's thousands of jobs that are still needed to be filled around the world, not just in the United States. Electricians, welders, machinists, robotic engineers. How do we get them into this beautiful industry that we call home here? And so we're working with them, AIA, IAAA, and other entities in 3 regions across the United States to develop pilot programs for this. Last piece I'll talk about here is on human spaceflight. With human spaceflight, one of the things that the Vice President did announce was the fact of our recommitment. We already committed to the extension of the International Space Station through 2030. And I think that is a proper decision. It was before, it was at 2024. We look forward to our allies and to our partners of being able to announce their respective extensions as they go through their internal budget and government processes as well. But it's important because it shows leadership, it shows the partnerships that we have, and also to what we just heard, it also allows for that opportunity for us to partner with the commercial space station industries, to be able to learn from each other and be able to have a smooth transition through 2030. And I think that's really important. One of the things also, though, as we all know, we're going back to the moon, that we announced is the fact of we have a rocket, we have a capsule, we've contracted out a lander, there'll be another contract coming out, and what's the surface of the moon? What is the government, what is the architecture, what are we doing on the surface of the moon? And so that'll be one of the things that we'll be looking at here shortly. The other element is the research. The research on the space station. At the council meeting, there's this amazing scientist, stem cell researcher from Cedars-Sinai in California. He's growing heart stem cells on the International Space Station because the microgravity environment permits for better stem cell growth there that you can never do on the Earth. And back to what I said before, what's happening in space is bettering what's happening here on Earth. And now as we transition to commercial space stations, as we go further away from our home base of the Earth, we need to develop a lunar architecture to be able to enable further research in low Earth orbit as well as further away. So we're developing a plan for that. But all of this requires something. Money. So that's one of the things that we continuously focus on. Last year, NASA's budget was increased by about 8%, nearly $25 billion US for fiscal year 23. Fiscal year 23 actually begins in the United States this October 1st. Waiting for me, I hope, back in Washington, D.C. right now is the budget for fiscal year 24. And so you have to often put your money where your priorities are. So with NASA, priorities on space exploration, of course, and on climate research and Earth observation systems, on STEM, growing their STEM office as well. But similarly, from a security perspective, we had a significant increase in the budget for the Space Force as well, nearly a 30% increase in the Space Force budget to think about space differently, build different architectures of space. As we start thinking about the threats that we're starting to see from strategic competitor nations, how do we have a more resilient space architecture? Because again, what our Department of Defense is doing in space is enabling what we do here on the ground. And if we don't have those services in space, then we can't be able to do the missions that we have to do here and around the entirety of the Earth. And I would preach to the choir, as you already know, about the importance and value of space across all of these sectors along the way. And the last thing, if I may say, is with respect to the space industry. It's no longer just communication satellites, as important as they are still. It's no longer just Earth observation satellites, and it's no longer just space launch vehicles. There's so much activity from refueling in space to in-space assembly and manufacturing to space stations. There's so many different routes and mechanisms. One of the roles that we have as a government is the ability and need to be able to provide a predictable and flexible pathway to be able to ensure that we have authorization of these capabilities. And the current rules and regulations that allow that they don't really exist. But they have to change in a way, and that's some of the conversations that we're having with our industry to make sure that, one, that we enable these pathways. So for those of you that are insurers and those of you that are investors, you have the confidence to build and invest in these industries. And then secondly is the ability to make sure that we allow for innovation as well. And then I would also say there's actually a third element too, is so much activity is happening in space. Just as I saw the mountains this past weekend, and you see the effect of climate on the mountains, in our environment, the sustainability here on Earth. It's the exact same thing in space. We need to make sure that the activities and the innovation that we do in space are done in a responsible, in a sustainable manner, so then we can benefit that for all of humanity, and we continue to innovate and explore. So with that, I want to thank you guys very much. Enjoy the breakfast, enjoy the conference, and looking forward to meeting lots of you this week.
So I just want to wrap up the breakfast. Feel free to stick around and network. As you know, a lot of networking helped us get where we are today. So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it on behalf of Nanoracks and Voyager Space family. Thank you.